For me, as well as for my colleagues who run the contextual studies program of the University of St. Gallen, the financial crisis of the last years has been very good news. All of a sudden, everybody has discovered or rediscovered the virtues of reflection and social competence. In terms of intellectual equities, the value of the responsibility stock has skyrocketed. As if it had somehow to apologize for its former enthusiasm for a deregulated free market economy, the university has officially decided that finally the contextual studies, which represent a third of the classes taught here, might be a suitable USP. And since the business schools all over the world, including the US, have more or less gone through the same kind of strategic reorientation, we are now in a very comfortable position, even in a leading one, when it comes to the conversion of selfish and greedy would-be managers to responsible citizens. St. Gallen is, so to speak, the lighthouse for repentant business schools, which threat otherwise to drown in their own guilt. We very much like the notion of lighthouse here. Liberal learning is going to save the world, or at least our little academic world. And as far as liberal learning is concerned, nobody can compete with St. Gallen, at least in quantitative terms. To put it in Disney's terms, we have basically become the new rescuers, you know, the kind of heroic little mice fighting the big fat cats. I have proposed, by the way, this title to my colleagues for the next big conference on the contextual studies, The Rescuers, but they didn't think it was funny. I don't know why. Maybe it's not funny. We should therefore be happy and grateful to Lehman and his various brothers. But is this story true? Is it really the way things have happened? Actually, that would not be such good news, because it would mean that as soon as things will be better there, they will again start to forget about us. Therefore, let's do some wishful thinking. What do we have to do if we don't want them to forget about us? My point will be the following. The financial crisis might have been the trigger of some form of recognition of the value or the necessity of liberal learning in business schools, but it has not been the gun, or if you wish, the cause of this recognition. The driving force behind it comes from much farther. It's linked to a much deeper evolution or even revolution. What has been going on over the last years has actually been driven for almost 2 decades now by the new information and communication technologies, which have radically changed, or are at least about to change, our access to knowledge, as well as our way to relate to knowledge. Well, I have to think in these terms because I'm not only a professor of French, but I'm working in an institute for media and communication management. It would be ridiculous, after all, if I talked about ethics here. We all know what we owe to Wikipedia, and we also know when Wikipedia doesn't do it, where and how to search for knowledge on more specialized websites, on databases, and so on. Nowadays, we are basically just a click away of a big chunk of what we used to teach to consider the core of our various fields of expertise. And the problem is that most of the time the students are even better and faster at clicking than we are. So of course the evolution I address here is not just about Wikipedia, which stands as a symbol. I could, for instance, also mention the whole dynamics of the Web 2.0. What I have in mind, what I'm really interested in, is the empowerment made possible by the new technologies. That is the fact that in almost all areas of knowledge or social practice, the use of the new technologies has led to a new balance, distribution, or attribution of power, empowerment of the people. I know it sounds kind of weird, a little bit like John Lennon in the 70s, you know, power to the people. But it is nevertheless real, and it's precisely what I would call a new humanism, although it might actually be a quite ordinary one, since its specificity consists in its availability for almost everybody. Actually, I really don't know if I'm a fan of the new humanism, don't get me wrong about that. But still it's happening. I define it as a humanism because this is what the first humanism, the one which has taken place between the 14th and the 16th century, has been about. Empowerment of the people. Free critical examination of the great books, as we would put it today. Usage of human reason, freedom of thought, which inevitably leads a few centuries later to freedom of expression. Just as the new humanism is driven by the digital technologies, the first one owed to the then brand new print technology to have become a tsunami for the old forms of power, especially those of the church. A tsunami that took many different names over the centuries. Protestantism, don't forget that Luther tried very hard but unsuccessfully to get Erasmus on his side. A little bit later, enlightenment, democracy, public opinion, you name it. These are the consequences of the empowerment made possible by the print technology. So I would say basically humanism is about empowerment, today as well as in older times. Humanism is about a new order of the discourse, as Foucault would put it. Humanism stands for the democratization of the order of discourse, although the very idea of an order of the discourse becomes problematic in the current context. Whereas the first humanism has led to an order of discourse we are still familiar with. It's, for instance, the order of our academic disciplines. The new order which emerges currently might as well be described as a disorder of discourse. Foucault revisited. We have become users. We behave like users all the time. That is also when we deal with knowledge. We do no longer abide by any order of the discourse. We are more and more used to use knowledge. We have lost the respect still shown for knowledge for its authority a few decades ago. We get our knowledge the way we want, the way we can, without necessarily complying with the rules of usage implemented by the disciplines, which look suddenly terribly old. The disorder of the discourse, which I consider one of the main features of the new humanism, is of course something that exceeds the mere technological innovations we are now used to. One should never be deterministic in matters of technology, by the way. But just as emails or SMS set now the standards in terms of speeds of communication, you know, if you are in love, would you still take the time to write a genuine letter, take the time to send it through regular mail, and take the time to wait for an answer on the same kind? You could kill yourself at least 20 times before you get the answer. Today, nobody waits more than 5 minutes to kill himself or herself. So, exactly in the same way, the accessibility of knowledge has changed the culture of knowledge. And just as we have switched in the field of culture from the so-called Bildungsbürgertum, or from the long-lasting hegemony of the national cultures, to an international consumption and entertainment culture, which, by the way, is also now available with a few clicks on iTunes or Amazon, and tomorrow in the cloud, we are in a process of switching from a disciplinary order of the discourses to a kind of knowledge supermarket where basically everybody will help her or himself. And what we have seen so far is actually probably just the beginning of this process. So what does that mean exactly? It means, just as a matter of example, that my dear colleagues of organization psychology, who are supposed to work on new ways of making employees more brave and productive, start instead to use a Russian theorist of literature such as Bakhtin, and they seem to enjoy it. I don't know why, but they enjoy it. Or worse, They use a representative of the most radical ultra-left movements of the 60s, such as Guy Debord, who is kind of my private property, you know. And Guy Debord would probably return himself in his grave if he knew about that. You know, he always got mad about everything anyway. And by the way, he does not have a grave. Actually, his ashes have been spread over the Seine in Paris at the Pointe du Vert Galant. That's an island in the middle of the Seine, and the Vert Galant was the surname of Henry IV, King of France, who was actually a kind of Dominique Strauss-Kahn of these times. And for him, the end of the story was even more bitter than for DSK, since he has been murdered. Okay, this has nothing to do with my topic, but now you know. At least you didn't come for nothing. So my colleagues of organization psychology are not only plundering the canonic works of literary theory, probably without having ever read Rabelais, the guy Barthin has worked so hard on, but who would read Rabelais? This old boring French humanist, but they even plunder authors such as Debord, although they don't know about his ashes in the Seine, and although they do so without asking for permission, without having been authorized to do so. Basically, these guys, and believe me, they are not the only ones, just help themselves go for shopping in the knowledge supermarket and come actually up with quite interesting new ideas. At least they seem to enjoy themselves, which is probably the best reason to do it. I would say that with the new humanism, we have entered the very democratic stage of interdisciplinary work, something which a few decades ago was still the turf of a minority of particularly distinguished scholars who had the authority to look at other disciplines and moreover to engage in subtle discussions with distinguished colleagues working in these other disciplines. You have to imagine the wooden library of the Harvard University or at Yale with very subtle people talking about their immense knowledge. You know. Today you don't need to be distinguished if you turn into disciplinary, which of course does not mean that Chris or Timon are not distinguished, but they are distinguished, so to speak, for the sake or the pleasure of being distinguished. It's no longer a requirement. So the new humanism is about empowerment. And it's also about a much faster and more complex circulation of ideas, about new ways of appropriation of ideas, or about what Debord, him again, has been thinking and doing in terms of détournement, appropriation with slight modification, Entwendung in German. In the same time, and this is a logical consequence of this kind of appropriation, new humanism is also about new forms of authorship, about collective or interactive forms of authorship, which, by the way, should lead to totally new ways of thinking about plagiarism and originality. Debord has written in 1967 that plagiarism was implied by the progress. Basically, the new humanists will be plagiarists, are plagiarists. I did not say that Chris or Timon were plagiarists, but they probably have still to do some efforts to become new humanists. They just started. A few weeks ago at a conference on the future of literature, a professor of creative writing from Penn University, Kenneth Goldsmith, who happens to be the author of a book entitled Uncreative Writing, has made a very nice statement, at least in my view, about the future of literature. Fuck authors, fuck literature. I don't have really time to elaborate on this very hot topic, hot at least for our friends from Germany, especially if they are thinking about getting into politics, but nevertheless, I take this opportunity to inform you that I will organize 2 conferences, 2, not 1, on plagiarism next year. I can't help doing some academic advertising here. It's my tribute to the economy of attention. Thank you for listening. If the stuff we try to do here with the contextual studies has really something to do with new humanism, then we have to answer the following question: why would this take place in this university? Why would this institution be particularly suitable for the new humanism, rather, for instance, than the University of Basel, to take a place the first humanists were familiar with? It's not because of the special green of the surrounding grazing land, neither because of our famous medieval library that would have finally led to the new humanism. Why in this rather small, young and incomplete, unfinished university where so many disciplines are not even taught, which was not even a university 20 years ago? The answer is precisely because it's young and incomplete, unfinished. Try contextual studies at the University of Basel. In a 552 years old university which had Erasmus, so to speak, as its body, you're not going to find a single professor of humanities there ready to prostitute him or herself by trying to teach what he or she knows to management students. They are too good for that, too smart. And they preferred to die rather than to have to switch to another audience. And you know what? They are actually dying, not even slowly, but surely. They are desperately running after a few students who are sticking with the old humanism, be it by ignorance, stupidity, or conviction. I'm about to say that it doesn't make any difference, but I won't say it. In other terms, they will never give up their disciplines, nor the order of discourse, nor the little power related to it. The less power you have, the more you like it, generally. This makes a big difference with St. Gallen, a university born only 114 years ago, where the development of the humanities has not been driven by disciplinary factors, but by the necessity to be relevant for business students, a necessity which favors, I wouldn't say an interdisciplinary state of mind, but rather an undisciplined or multidisciplinary one. St. Gallen is ideal for a new humanist anarchy, and it's not a coincidence if everybody here has read Guy Debord. That makes at least 3 people. And in my conviction with regards to the potential of the information communication technology, that this state of mind which I call humanism, that is the state of mind I call the new humanism, I think that this will be at the core of the universities of the future, which have no chances to survive if they don't give up their disciplinary orders of discourse. This is true not only for the humanities, the social sciences, including management and economics, but also in areas such as life science, where the traditional borders between physics, chemistry, biology, medicine, and engineering are currently completely remodeled. Today, Erasmus would choose St. Gallen and not Basel. Why, by the way, should the German model of the Humboldtian University, with its well-known disciplines, departments, and schools, be kept repeated for the eternity? Nothing against Germany here. The cars are great, but this model happens to be more than 200 years old. It has been invented at the time of, or more exactly made possible by, industrial printing, which has made books available to teachers and students under relatively democratic conditions. As long as you don't have the industrially printed books, there is no such thing as the Humboldtian University. And when the print industry is replaced by the digital technologies, it is probably about time to rethink the disciplinary model implemented with the former and now to a large extent obsolete technology. Because of their blindness about these changes, the old humanism dies more or less slowly everywhere, because the humanities departments are unable to get out of their disciplines, unable to identify the genuine cultural needs of people working in other areas or other disciplines, let alone the needs of undisciplined people who don't care about pre-requirements which would allow them to use such or such a piece of work. We should not always blame the economists or the managers when they fail to share our enthusiasm about the humanities. As long as it is about converting them to our own discipline, about imposing a specific order of discourse, it is just not going to work. Therefore, if you ask me about the future of the contextual studies, about what we should do, the most convincing statement which comes to my mind would be, fuck disciplines, fuck the order of this. I know it's not original, it's almost plagiarism, and moreover, it sounds like a statement of an old May 68 activist, something, by the way, I have not been, because I was just too young, I'm sorry for that, and I came too late for the party, which in turn might explain why I try to catch up now. But I really happen to be convinced that the future of liberal learning as such, or in business schools, will have to take in account the dynamics of the new humanism, or to take it from the other side, that the new humanism is the biggest chance for liberal learning to establish itself within a totally remodeled academic order, if not its only chance. I come to my last point. We are not the only ones who should ask ourselves if we can keep doing for the eternity what we have always done. We have actually a colleague here, somewhere in the School of Economics or in the School of Finance. I don't know who it is. Maybe he or she is hiding now, I don't know. But allegedly, he has said that if we don't know about mathematics, econometrics, and all these scientific goodies, we should shut up about the financial crisis, which brings it to the point. Should we really? Even if we were shutting up in order to please our very distinguished colleague, it would probably be useless, since the new humanists are everywhere, especially on the internet, and since they are very, very talkative. Actually, this is another feature of the new humanists. It seems that they are just no longer able to shut up. In other terms, the new media not only reshape the access to knowledge, they also redefine what belongs to the public space, and the professors of finance might like it or not, the financial crisis and the banks are now definitely part of the public discussion. In 2007, the French economist and journalist Guy Sormand has published a book with a wonderful title, L'économie a toujours raison. Economy is always right. This sounds like from some very old times, no? I doubt that he would still dare 5 years later to come up with the same title. Actually, I'm not even sure he has published any book since. Should we shut up? Is the economy always right? Should we submit to economics as a discipline, as the official discourse of the economy? Should we ask for permission, authorization, if we want to be part of the discussion? The answer, of course, is an obvious no, which does not mean that in our turn we should teach lessons to economists and to the economy, especially moral ones. Actually, I don't believe at all in moral, probably because at the end of the day it amounts precisely always to teach lessons. It implies some form of imagined superiority. It's basically a symmetrical posture to the shut up of my colleague. But still we won't shut up. The purpose of the contextual studies is, among other goals, to contribute to organize, to structure the public discussion about the unreasonable reason of the financial economy, to organize a positive, maybe even creative debate around this issue, as well, of course, as around many others. And we will do it with the diversity of our knowledge, with history, philosophy, sociology, literature, psychology, media, and so on. We will go into the history of financial crisis as a balance to the amnesias of the world of finance. We will test the philosophical strength of the diktats of the economical reason. We will investigate its culture and social contexts. With regard to the new humanism, this knowledge is neither less nor more legitimate than any other, including the discourses held by the authorized experts who happen to have been wrong on so many things and who still try so often to avoid to confront their expertise with other discourses. they too have a long way to go towards the new disorder of the discourse. Obviously, disciplines are not yet dead. I don't know if you have noticed, in order at least to slow down, if not to stop the constant erosion of audience, in order to get back all the people who are no longer used to be passive consumers, who have more fun with staging themselves in various ways in the social media than with watching their programs, the TV channels produce more and more crime scene series, with dozens of murders investigated and, of course, cleared every week by scientific experts who would never fail, not even once. In France, the title of the most famous crime scene series is Les Experts, by the way. Just as TV does not want you to get away, to join the disorder of the discourses and representations of the on the internet, the message of the crime scene series is clear. You will never get away with your crime. The experts will still win, just as others pretend that the economy is always right. Who will prevail at the end, the new humanists or the experts? We don't know yet, and maybe we will never know. Maybe the conflict will go on for decades, for centuries, because it might as well be a positive and creative conflict. At least it is this tension between expertise and new humanism which gives its sense to the contextual studies. Let's believe in dialectics, since we have to believe in something. So my conclusion would be, fuck the experts, but then what would we do if there were no more experts to fuck? Therefore, I should probably modify a little bit this conclusion. Long live the experts. Thank you very much.